So let me welcome everyone. I'm Ekaterina Konovalova, and I lead our Martechify initiatives, our programming, content, and events. And today we have a very practical session. I'm very excited to welcome our speakers and Rich, who will moderate the discussion. Today we'll talk about email marketing in 2025, adapting to Apple new change and emerging trends. So if we can flip to the next slide. I will share a little bit more with you about Martechify community. So I think next one more. This is a fancy picture of our upcoming event. So in general, if you're new to Martechify, we're a community of like-minded professionals, and we want to learn about trends in marketing technology, automation, AI. And here we're sharing best practices, case studies, and specific examples with each other to learn and grow. So this chat will be a shorter version. Sometimes we have forums that are about 1 hour long, and chat is a more practical format where experts will be discussing specific trends, details, best practices, maybe share some examples. I know today we may even see some illustrations of the companies that failed to follow some of the recent updates. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And Rich, would you like to introduce our speakers?
You bet. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Martechify. I'm Rich Herbst. I'm part of the founding team of Martechify, and I also head Ascend Marketing. And I'd like to extend a special welcome today to our guest experts. We have Steven Stouffer, who is an expert in all things automation. Currently, he's a director of automation solutions at Tray AI. And this is a platform where we can develop workflows incorporating AI, especially suite for data handling. And then also welcome to Tracy Smith. She is one of our project leaders and part of the leadership at Ascend Marketing. I've known her a long time, a very expert marketer in multiple facets. In today's world, for the clients she serves, she's delivering email programs at great scale. So she has a lot to share about our topic for today. So welcome, Tracy and Steven. Glad you're here, and let's dive in.
All right, thank you.
Yes, what I'd like to do is launch with let's just highlight what you think are the major trends or considerations that are important for 2025. Tracy, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, happy to. And thanks for the opportunity. Everyone, of course, is going to say AI. That's the first thing on everyone's mind related to AI. And I know we're going to dive into that. But beyond AI, one of the big things for me is security. There is so much going on. I was reading a Wired magazine article. Phishing emails since iOS 18.2 launched in December, phishing emails have gone up 49%, according to Forbes. Insane increase. So I think as AI continues across the gamut, both creating content, managing content, helping people understand what's going in their inbox, the security of that is really going to come into play. But Steven, let's see if you have different thoughts than me.
Yeah, I'm like neck deep in AI stuff. So like security is a really good one. I'll say too that like data and being able to ground AI in something is also very important. So not only just having clean data and data that you can provide to AI about your products, your services, or in the case of email, maybe what's worked in the past and what hasn't worked. So providing it that context so it can actually do what you want it to, I think is going to become more and more prominent as we kind of go through 2025 and as people start to adopt a lot of these agents that are coming out.
Super good. So guys, what I'm hearing so far, certainly AI is the hot subject of the moment and will be for some time. And then changes in email practices and security concerns are a major factor in the email world today. Because of these two things, the platforms are evolving. So we've mentioned briefly iOS, but can you guys speak to when we think about the platforms and the evolution, what do you see and what's most relevant for our community here?
Sure. So something that comes to mind is when I was kind of reading through some of the recent updates from some of these email service providers, and the way that they're categorizing emails now with AI. So even things like AI is now dictating what gets put into which categorization within your inbox, and even what is at the top of the inbox. Even going so far as to summarizing the content in your email for you. So like getting back to the basics, where if you're sending emails with mostly images, and there are some big organizations out there that literally have all image based emails, right? There's not a single line of text. That is going to be a big problem when those emails are hitting inboxes and there's Apple, Google having AI go through those emails, and then it's trying to summarize something that is all images, right? So if you have a lot of images, leveraging alt text, so alternative text to images, where if images don't load, for those who are developing or sending emails on Outlook, you probably know what alt text is. But like making sure that images have the alternative text in it, and then you're also writing emails, not from a point of view of trying to like prompt engineer AI, but being very clear and concise with what that email is for. So when AI goes through it, it can properly categorize it and put you at the top of the inbox. Like I wouldn't try to hack things to bypass it. Like there's nothing that's going to piss off the email service providers more than you trying to like, hack your way to the top. So write clear and concise emails, include alt text when you do images, and make sure, you continue to follow best practices of doing like, a healthy combination of images and text and whatnot, just for the end user's experience.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that because I have seen, I've been in calls with clients who are saying, how do we get out of the promotion and get into the primary? Well, if you're sending from a mailing list, you're not going to. So no amount of, as you called, hacking the system is going to get you there. You'll be there on those one-to-one communications, those transactional emails that says, here's what you need to know. You placed an order, something shipped. But if you've got a promotion, it's going to be in a promotion or Gmail, the different categories. I like what you said, Stephen. I think it really comes down to just being a clean email marketer, using clean copy, a clear message. If you're one of the good guys, you're really trying to communicate with your customer, give them the information they need. But from what I've seen, it's really going more of a social feel to what's happening in the emails, as opposed to little paragraphs. Here's who you are. Here's who we are. No, people want those quick bullets. That's, goldfish bowl, as we all hear, the 3-second, what can you scan? What can you read? We're seeing a lot of iconography going in, leaning towards social again. So yes, it's simple, but it's a time to have fun. It's an opportunity to really engage with your customers in an interesting and different way. Why not try the icons? Why not try images that are a little different than standard? But I will put a word of caution in that for Gmail and Apple Mail, they have very strict rules now in terms of character counts, in terms of pixels. So make sure that you pay attention to those, because if you don't, you're going to come out and your email is just going to be nothing but, I know eCaterina had that. It's going to come in. There was one we can share that was from my energy company that basically nothing renders because you're not meeting the new criteria. But Rich, I'd love your thoughts on that.
No, I think this is good advice so far. I'd like to just mark off a couple other high-level issues if we can. So I think part of what we're focusing on here is the trend reflected especially by Apple of AI-enabled categorization of emails, how to manage that, how to not get shunted to the very bottom of somebody's email priority. So I think we've been talking about that. Are there other shifts in the technologies or the platforms that you all would want to highlight here that also, just for the benefit of our community here, what other technical concerns do you see?
Yeah, I see, especially when you go with Apple, You need to have all of your pre-approvals in. That's really big. For those in the email community, your BIMI, your DMARC. If you don't have your DMARC set up, you're going to see problems. Apple has its own, what they call ABC, Apple Branded Connect. And there is a specific registration you can do for email that makes you a pre-approved vendor, if you will. Everything, you're verified, your logo's verified, your content. So when you pull up in that promotion tab, instead of just being one of the 50 that come in, your logo will be there. You'll be shown in a better light, and it's a better way to communicate with customers. So I would encourage people to do that across the board. Or if you have, your BIMI, your DMARC, your branding set up, now's a great time to look at it, because some of the rules have changed in terms of the logos and the specs. Make sure you're meeting all of that criteria. But Stephen, I'd love from the technical side to hear your thoughts.
So one thing that you can, depending on what email service provider that you use, if you send from HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, whatever it is, sometimes you can get a sender reputation score, or if you use something like Return Path or something like that, you can put your IP address, if it's a dedicated IP or even a shared IP, and you can figure out what your reputation is. So if you're on a shared IP address and you get a kind of a crappy score, like in the 80s, the upper end of the 90s is kind of where you want to be. 95, 96, 100%, or 100 is like really, really good. So like I would say get that if you're having deliverability issues. First thing I would do is what Tracy mentioned, right? Check your SPF record on your DNS, DMARC, make sure all that's in place. But if that's in place and that looks good and you're still having deliverability issues, check your sender reputation score. And then depending on that, you can get maybe a different dedicated IP address. But separate from the kind of those technical setup things, I think the way that we are measuring success in email is also changing with the way that a lot of these providers are putting updates, right? So like in the olden days, now I might be aging myself here, I go back in email marketing 10 years, but like it used to be open rate and click-through rate that I was just like solely focused on open to click rate, right? That's changing. A lot of these email service providers and Gmail, Apple, they're opening these emails and they're even like clicking the links in the email. So there's like a bot that's doing that just to check for spam and risk tolerance, or putting scores against it. So like you can't really trust open rate anymore. You can't really trust click-through rate anymore. So like the best way to measure an email success is, did the person do what you wanted them to? So if the email is pointing to a landing page and on the landing page there's a form, like listen to those form conversions and have that be the metric for success. So like the way that we think about what emails are working and what emails are not working is even shifting as there's updates being rolled out.
No,
Very
I like
good.
that.
So,
I'm sorry,
okay.
and I was going to add, I know for some of my clients, we even take it all the way through to not just the form, but the take rate. Did they purchase? Making that connection all the way through. But the bots is something, I've seen that quite a bit. And you look at those click-through rates and it's like, wait a minute, they all clicked at exactly the same time within, a split second of the email being received. That was a new one that for me in the last year that popped up. So it may be new to others too. And you can check that in your Marketo, Stephen, as you were saying, or your service provider can give you that insight.
Yeah, and there'd be even some programs that I think some businesses, like the more sophisticated businesses, may have already planned around that, where if an email gets sent and someone opens or clicks it immediately as it's delivered, they may actually just unsubscribe or delete that person thinking it's spam, right? Because that's what spam was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But today it's not spam, it's Apple Mail doing its job. Of processing emails in just a different way. So if you've got programs where you're unsubscribing people or deleting them based on those type of interactions, you need to rethink the way that program works, because today it's not spam. It's actually just Apple Gmail doing its thing, and we need to work around that.
Yes. So let's kind of mark off where we are, guys. So we've talked about a couple technical trends, categorization of emails. The second one I think we've been talking about is the email providers filtering senders who are highly credible versus ones who are less so. So, all of the settings we've been talking about are, and frankly, the practices we're speaking of are ones that build sender credibility in the platforms and that enable the emails to get through. So two big trends I would just mark off there, and major considerations for how we think about email marketing going forward. I'd like to stir the pot on one more. Stephen, earlier you mentioned data and the importance of data. So I'm thinking about another evolution in email technology whereby people today have, almost everybody has multiple email addresses, but the amount of email addresses that individuals have is going to be mushrooming. And maybe that's just a launching point into a bigger question. How do we think about data and targeting and making sure that our lists are sound so that we can get emails through in the first place?
Yeah, I'm going to put the data into 3 different buckets, and I'm going to try to remember what these 3 different buckets are as I explain it. So you've got your segmentation data, right? Who is this person? Depending on what service you use, sometimes there's scoring and grading, right? Scoring is how interested that person is in your product and services. Grading is how interested you are in them, right? Do they fit your ICP? So being able to segment out your database into relevant chunks to email them very personably. So that's like kind of bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is data that you can put in your email, right? Personalization. So information you have about that person that is not creepy to include in your email. Things like if they're a customer, what products and services do they have? Does this email that I'm promoting make sense? Like, can we actually put in dynamic content in that email and promote the upsell version of their SKU that they have? So data in the email. And then I would say that contextual data too, when we think about AI, the data kind of coming in and out of AI to ground it in your products and services. So do we have data of how we talk about our products and services? Do we have a tone of voice that we can feed the LLMs to say, hey, I want you to write an email, but it needs to be grounded in our business and how we think about the world? Being able to do that and do it effectively is going to allow marketing to move quick and also be able to leverage the different AI kind of agents that are out there to get the most out of them, because we've all seen content written by ChatGPT. There's like a rocket emoji, a bunch of hyphenated words. You didn't know that could be hyphenated. So yeah, those 3 buckets I think are very important.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add to that in 2 different ways. One, I think you go back to basic 101 marketing. Use the data. Data mining there's so much information available now, and AI can help you do the data mining so that you've got the right message to the right target. That's always key in marketing. Beyond that, I think you also have to look at the entire journey. So stop looking, in my opinion, at the one single email. We have a new product, we sent one email. What's the entire journey for that product? How are you talking about it? How are you talking about your entire portfolio, your brand? Look at the data that way, because they may not have responded with that first introduction email, but they might have responded on the 3rd email. So if you look at the entire stream, then you can really use those tools to understand how you're engaging with their customers, instead of just the standard, we sent an email, how many people clicked on the link or filled out the form.
Good points. Thank you. One thing I would raise, and you may or may not have comments on this, but data and list hygiene in the first place. How many organizations have target lists or data platforms that are full of duplicates, or where there's low quality records in there, all of which can really impair the effectiveness of the marketing. Any thoughts or comments on that front, guys?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, Stephen, if you don't mind. To me, that's table stakes. If you're not routinely going in and looking at your contacts and or your leads that you're purchasing, you've got to do that today. You have to know who you're communicating to and making sure the information is correct. That's base level. Once you have that, then you can start segmenting your data and looking at it correctly. But if your list hygiene is not, if you don't have a good process for continually checking the list hygiene, then you're probably wasting your time sending emails to people that may or may not be relevant to them. And you get into unsubscribe, which to me is the worst thing you could do, because if they unsubscribe, you've lost them forever.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I would just append a quick comment, not only acquired lists, but also data, like if you're thinking about cross-sell, upsell kind of email
Absolutely.
communications, that's a different kind of curation and it requires a whole lot of care. Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look around at your LinkedIn and your connections, and how often do those folks change jobs, right? How often do you change jobs? So like I think the average tenure for a SaaS company is anywhere from like 1.5 to 3 years is kind of like the average. So like within a couple of years, that person has already moved on to another organization. So I forget the statistic. We should include this in some sort of follow-up, but it's something like every year your database is like 20 or 30% out of date. So every single year, you've got 30% of your database that is no longer accurate. So doing some sort of quarterly review enrichment process, or even having something like an AI agent where you're not leaning on the big enrichment providers like Clearbit or ZoomInfo or anything like that. You're actually using real world data where you have an agent, like like at our business here at Trey, we have an agent that actually uses the person's information to go find them on their LinkedIn profile. And we just use whatever's on their LinkedIn profile to actually pull the most relevant and accurate data because people are more inclined to put it out there. And then you can also pull like press releases and different posts that that person does, and then bring it into your database because all of this is publicly accessible. So yeah, the way that you think about data, one, it should be constantly updating it. If like twice a year, maybe once a year at minimum. But yeah, think in terms of who's your ICP, how likely are they to change their job? If you're in the like banking industry or government agency type work, maybe it's not 1 year, maybe it's 2 to 3 years because your ICP is less likely to job hop, like maybe SMB SaaS companies. So yeah, just got to look through the lens, do at least an audit once a year at minimum.
Fair enough. Well, we're getting a little short on time, so what have we not touched on, Tracy and Stephen, that you think we should be touching on today?
I think the thing to watch, I know we talked about security, but for me, the thing to watch as an email marketer, the privacy laws. There's information, I was looking at my notes here, there are 8 states that are poised to implement privacy laws around email in 2025. We're on our way, in my opinion, to maybe a federal, something like they have in Europe, a federal privacy law relating to email. I would encourage people to make sure you stay up on what's happening in your particular state, or if you email to multiple states. I think we're going to get to, by the end of the year, we're going to have different rules in different states, and you're going to have to start segmenting and making sure for Texas, it's one way. For California, it's another way. Or you implement what is the most restrictive and you implement that for everybody. But stay on top of that because it's changing insanely fast.
Yeah, I remember when GDPR came out, and it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, looking into the future, I would say agents are going to become a more and more commonplace. I know that we started to hear that buzzword, I think, toward the middle of last year, but it was really just a buzzword. Like there weren't very many actual practical applications. But as we look into this year, I think Salesforce is developing Agentforce. HubSpot's doing kind of their own thing that is really interesting. So we're going to see a lot more agents pop up in apps where we're not going to think in terms of segmenting our lists and then sending an email to that segment. It's going to be a one-to-one personalized email that an agent is going to handle on our behalf. And I think that does 2 things. One, it allows you to be very personal and hopefully not creepy, to kind of build that personalized email where the only email that you're sending is just one-to-one person through that agent. And then it also allows you to handle privacy concerns, like Tracy mentioned, where you're handling the privacy at an individual level versus a mass level. Because having to go through those 7 different states and the different countries, you got CCPA, you've got GDPR, you got CAN-SPAM, you've got Castle up there in Canada. Like, instead of having to worry about all of those with one email, it's going to almost be able to have like a privacy agent and then an email sending agent that will work together to process the data uniquely. So I think that's where we're headed. We're probably not going to get there this year, but maybe within the next couple of years, we're going to see agents pop up all over the place and hopefully solve some of these problems for us and make it easier and not make it harder. I'm bullish on it being easier for us. That's what I'm hoping we get.
Well, it'll certainly be different in any case. Good thoughts. Thank you, guys. I think we have a couple of wrap-up comments from Katrina and the team. I would like to invite our experts to stay on after these closing thoughts. For anybody who'd like to stay on and ask questions and just have some dialogue, Q&A type dialogue, feel free to stay on for a few minutes past the half hour, and we can do that. But let's, before we hit the half hour, let's see if we have some closing comments from Katrina and team.
Absolutely. And then, so I'll ask Sarah to flip a couple of slides. We have a few illustrations from Tracy, and maybe we can cover it in the Q&A. But let's go to the last slide where I can announce our upcoming events. So as usual, I'd like to encourage you to check our website, our LinkedIn, our YouTube channel. We started publishing a lot of long form and shorts conversations with different marketing experts. And our next event will be a virtual forum. This time it will be April 2nd. Usually it's around lunchtime, 1-hour session, and we'll talk about harness the cloud, accelerate growth with cutting edge data technology. And we'll start the promotion of this event in the next week or so. And then exciting, no more COVID isolation. So we plan an in-person session on May 14th. And we'll talk about how marketing organizations evolve and adapting to the rise of Martech and advancing your career. So basically, approach your career development and what kind of Martech skills you need to propel your career to the next level. And we're also thinking ahead. We'll give ourselves a quick break for the summer, and then in September we will regroup again, and we'll talk about maximizing your Martech stack, unlocking more power within your existing budget. So with that, if you are open to staying for a few more minutes, we can probably dive deeper into a few examples that Tracy shared with us and maybe ask a few more questions in the chat.
All right, thank you, everybody. Yeah, you're invited to stay on. And for everybody who has to leave, thank you for being here. We hope you found some good value today. Okay, so do we have some questions to talk about? Let's start there.
Should I read the questions from the chat?
Yes,
so
that
one
would be
of them. What do you recommend for how to handle bots from email marketing impacting lead scores? Should we reduce scores when that happens?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? It's a $1 million question. Stephen, you're on the tech side of things, so why don't you jump in? I have an opinion, but you probably have a more informed opinion.
Yeah, normally what happens is whenever you send an email, it gets immediately opened and clicked, and even sometimes a form is submitted. So looking at those times is good, but the only way that I've basically found a workaround is essentially to kind of put everyone into like a quarantined list if this is like an issue that like I worked at Yellow Pages and this was a huge issue. Like we would get thousands and thousands of submissions from spam. The way that we worked around it is they would go into a quarantine list, and then we would actually use a enrichment validation provider. So like Bright Verify is a good one. Never Bounce is another good one, where you can put that email address and then it will give you a kind of like a valid confidence score back, where it'll say invalid, valid, maybe it's a throwaway inbox. And then you use that status, and as long as it's one of the good statuses, depending what industry you're in, you can just pick up the valid status and then allow that to get MQL'd or scored or whatever it is. So yeah, Bright Verify, Never Bounce, those are the two go-tos. Never Bounce has a really good integration with the different email service providers. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
I always tie it back to the take rate. What is the lead score, but are they performing? Yes, you have your lead score in Marketo, but look, did they actually purchase? Did they actually click on the link? Make that whole journey in terms of your analytics instead of that one particular notification that you sent to that one lead.
Wonderful. We actually have a few questions from an earlier chat. One of them from Ken. My emails have been blocked by Apple for years. Is there a way to resolve that?
That's a giant question. Depends on why it's blocked. The first thing I would do, I mean, you can work through the process of the ABC, the Apple branded Connect and the Apple branded Mail. If you go through that process, they will look at your logo, your company, your information, and that'll be a great way, hopefully, to get feedback from Apple as to why are you being blocked, and maybe even get yourself in a position where you're a brand approved email sender. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, being blocked can happen 3 different ways. Either one, you're sending content that you shouldn't be sending. It's coming off as very spammy. 2, you've got some technical issues where you haven't validated your, like you haven't put an SPF record up on your DNS or something. So that's a technical issue. And then 3, I guess, would be if you're on a shared IP address and there's other people on that IP address doing spammy things, you're going to be lumped into that too. So an easy solution would be, 1, check to make sure your technical stuff is taken care of. And if you're not sure what that is, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. And then 2, I would say, get on your own dedicated IP address or request an alternate IP address. And oftentimes those
Yes.
2 alone would, solve some of your problems. But yeah, but neither of those are going to be solved if you are not sending content that is appropriate, right? Put a lot, if you put free in there, a whole bunch, there's a lot of dollar signs, lots of red text. There's all sorts of things that will trigger a provider to basically mark you as spam. So knowing actually I have a document I can share that lists off all those things that will basically put you in the spam inbox if you do it. But saying free 10 times would do that.
Yeah.
Perfect. We have another question from Peter. Are you seeing brands effectively combining email marketing with retargeting to drive engagement?
I wasn't going to go first. Rich or Stephen, y'all want to take that one? Or do you want
Yeah,
to?
sure. So this is going to take me back to my agency days. So maybe the Ascend people will appreciate this. Getting the data out from the Google and Facebook is very difficult. They don't make it very easy to marry up retargeting information from those providers into your email service provider. So if you use Pardot, Marketo, HubSpot, whatever it is, so it's very difficult. So if you can extract the information or even use UTM parameters as a way to kind of communicate between those 2 platforms, that's what I've found probably the easiest way to do. But if you can actually connect the 2 data sets, then absolutely. I think to Tracy's point earlier, having a story to tell and making sure that content is seamless from one page to another to an email, right? Because if you know that they're interested in a specific topic, then you can continue that conversation via email. So I've seen it work together, but it's kind of difficult to actually share the data amongst the platforms. They don't tend to play nice. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah, certainly can be done though. Very hard to do at scale. But I would just add that comment. So good. Any other questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but if we want to take a look at the examples that we have in the deck where Tracy can maybe quickly guide us through the fails.
Sure.
And then we can conclude on that one.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I love sharing this. It's redacted, but it is literally an email sent from my power company to me right after the Apple launch. I don't know how they missed the industry buzz that this was coming, but they missed it. And this is what I got. It is a screen capture. So if you go back one more slide where it's showing the little iPhones. There you go. So basically nothing rendered. Nothing rendered at all. Your payment has been received. It didn't recognize that it was a one-to-one. This went into the promotions category because it didn't recognize this was an actual update for me about a company with whom I did business. So this is in my mind, the worst case scenario. I will tell you, the next month when I got this, my energy company had the most beautiful email that came in. So I'm sure somebody was on the phone with marketing saying, what happened? And it's been corrected. And now they're Apple brand approved. So all the logo shows up. They're no longer submitting from the big list. It's going into the update category. But if you don't stay on top of what's happening in the industry, this is where you can end up if you're not paying attention.
The poor email marketer that had to learn the lesson the hard way.
I know.
I've been there. I've been there, done that.
We've all had missteps in our careers. We have to admit those. But this is one of those where people have been talking about it for a year. We know it's coming. We know it's coming. What's going to be happening? The beta was released last fall. The poor email marketer. Yeah, but they did a beautiful job because the new one, I need to actually add that in because it came in last week. The new one looks fantastic.
Nice.
That's
Good
perfect.
example.
I just saw another comment come in about the data being updated, changing jobs every 1 to 6 years. I do recommend that you do an audit of your database, basically at least a minimum every year, because even the people who don't change companies, they're changing jobs within the organization. So you might have a manager, a product manager that goes from a specialist to a manager, or a manager to VP. So like the way that people are moving through organizations is changing. So you want to have different conversations based on the roles that they play in the organization. And I do know that like there are some sectors that move a little bit slower. Like I mentioned before, government, finance, they move slower. So your data is not going to be out of date quite as fast. But if you focus on like SaaS SMB, I can guarantee you that folks average tenure is not going to be 6 years. So yes, keep your data up to date, but always look through the lens of your business. And if you do 2 audits and there's not much movement between those 2 audits, then, you can slow it down a little bit, maybe do it biannually.
Yeah, and I'm going to tack on to that. What may seem obvious, but people forget, if you're a B2C company, when you talk to your customers, just ask, hey, is this still your phone number? Is this still your address? I know that seems simple, but in your email, your email may go out. Has your email address changed? Is the information different? Because you're sending an email, but if you're shipping to the wrong address, or you're not communicating correctly, that's the best way to find things out, is just literally ask your customer, is this still accurate?
Yeah, we're just deleting them. Like through GDPR, there's like a policy that basically says you can only retain data for whatever is necessary or reasonable. So like if you're holding on to data and you're not using that information for anything, deleting and cleaning up your database is probably, or at least archiving, right? Is probably one of the smartest decisions that you can do. And if you do, your deliverability, your open rates, your click-through rates, you're going to see an improvement there, because you're communicating to the people who need to be communicated with, and you're removing some of those extra people that may have been imported from ZoomInfo 6 years ago.
Great. And we have another question that just came in from Krista. What resources companies do you subscribe to or follow to stay up to date on email industry trends, such as changes with compliance or email providers, besides martechify.com?
Yes.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So it depends on what ecosystem you kind of sit in. So like I kind of am entrenched in the Salesforce ecosystem. So Salesforce Ben is one that I kind of look to a lot. They do a lot of really great articles on that. If you do like HubSpot or Marketo, there's like these micro communities and Slack groups that you can be part of. So like if you're a Pardot customer, there's a Pardashians group. If you're a HubSpot customer, there's all sorts of hub communities that you can get involved in. So other than Ascend, of course, there's some Slack groups that I think are the most up to date, because they're so real-time communication and you can very collaboratively talk to people. And then there's some good blogs out there too. But Slack communities are kind of where I'm in these days.
Yeah, and I'm a big A&A member. So there's, if you're a member of ANA, there's always great content. It's not as fast as Slack, but there's great content available there. And I just checked your normal industry trades. You know, what is Google posting? What is Apple posting? You know, I follow Tim Cook just so that I know, okay, here's what's coming with Apple, because he will announce today what they're going to be doing next year. So you can keep things in the back of your mind as being prepared. Go ahead, Katrina.
Oh, I was going to add Dallas Mercator user group, and Ascent started hosting some of these events. So check it out that now we also have this local community of email marketers. All right. What Salesforce group was that? The question was, if we talk about Dallas, I think there was a question to Stephen about Salesforce group.
Yeah, so there's Salesforce Ben, which is a blog. They do some really good posts about kind of current trends like Agentforce and stuff there. And then there actually is a Slack community too called Ohana. So if you want to join the Slack Ohana group, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and I can provide those resources. And then there's kind of like other specific Slack communities like the Pardashians if you use Pardot or Marketing Cloud Account Engagement. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. And if anyone here wants to just connect with me on LinkedIn, I can share those resources.
Yeah, and some people added Salesforce Legs as another resource. So it sounds like we had a really fun discussion. Is it time to wrap up?
I think let's wrap. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tracy
right.
and Stephen.
Yeah, thank you.
Fabulous insights today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
Thanks
very
everyone.
much. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.